I never asked for this. Literally, I've made a point of not directly asking anyone to subscribe to Iceberg Tech, and yet somehow 90,000 of you have done so anyway. Thank you all so much for subscribing and for watching the channel and for helping me reach this milestone. To celebrate, I've made the most basic, self-indulgent filler content available to a YouTuber, the Q&A. So, the question you're all here for, what's with all the mini PC reviews? The truth is, I've been making mini PC videos all along. Some of the earliest videos on the channel were reviews of thin clients from HP and Dell and Lenovo, and it really would have been a key part of the content that I made, except the scalper pandemic happened and I felt the need to shift from full PC reviews to just reviewing individual components. Partly financially, but mainly because it felt like that was the mood at the time. People wanted to buy old second-hand graphics cards because they couldn't afford new ones. Over time, that meant the channel kind of moved in the direction of graphics cards and CPUs and away from mini PCs. When I was contacted by B-Link and Geekom and all these other companies, it felt like an opportunity to diversify my content a bit, appeal to new audiences. The mini PC videos never did quite as well in terms of views, but other than that, feedback was generally pretty good. I still got the same like to dislike ratios as I did for my CPU and GPU reviews, so I didn't feel like I had to stop. I did have some people complain, but I felt like this was just part of the experience, you know. I think some people took issue with the sponsored tag in the corner, thinking that meant I'd taken money for the reviews, when in reality that's just something you have to do when you get a free sample. You have to declare that you didn't pay for it, that you've received something of value for making your video. It applies to everyone, whether it's Linus or Hardware Unboxed or smaller channels than me. A lot of the time you might not notice it because people have other sponsorships, like you've got your URCD keys and your Squarespaces and what have you. Anyway, I would have been happy to continue just making one video a week on a graphics card or a CPU, and then occasionally do an extra video when a mini PC came along just to get some extra views. However, you may have been aware that a lot of your favourite content creators recently have been complaining about a drop-off in views, that it's something to do with the algorithm or AI or UK adult verification rules, things like that. I haven't really talked about this, but it has affected me. My views are down across the board as well, which means I have to start making difficult choices about what I make and what I don't make, and in the coming weeks, I am going to have to start focusing down on things that I know are going to be successful, that are going to get a lot of views, and that doesn't include mini PCs. Either I'm going to stop making them altogether, or I'm going to make a new channel for mini PC reviews. Making a new channel does mean extra work. It means starting from scratch and building an audience all over again, but it also means a more focused audience, which is better for viewer retention, it's better for return views. It's just, by all YouTube metrics, it's always best to focus down your content to one specific thing. You would think that people would just not watch what they don't want to watch, but it doesn't seem to work that way. The problem is, I already have a second channel, and I already feel like I'm neglecting that, so I may be putting too much stuff on my plate. We shall see. With that out of the way, let's answer some questions. Ribbit902, I never actually looked at your sub count, thought you were in the 300k range. Well, thank you very much. I've always tried to give a big channel energy. I know I've failed at times, but yeah, I do my best. Thank you anyway. Courier11sec, how long do you generally hang on to components you get for your videos before sending them to the next owner? That depends. I've still got stuff from the Goat project. I've still got my the 3080 Ti boxed up somewhere because it's an EVGA model, and I kind of want to keep a hold of it. Even though I could really do with the money to put towards something else. I've been meaning to do a 3090 review, and it would be good to sell some old stuff to afford one, because they're still ridiculously expensive for what they do. How long do you think it will be viable to keep using X99 platform hardware in service? I think it might already be inviable. For a lot of people, power consumption, the number of cores, the amount of overclocking that's needed to be done to even kind of reach the level of a modern i3 or a previous generation Ryzen 5 or something like that. I think they're already kind of inviable. They're very much still useful in some regard. If you absolutely have a very, very fixed budget, you can still make them work. But I think in the long term, I think X99 is already on its way out. Who invented hats? That will be the beloved character actor Hattie Jakes from the Carry On movie franchise. What is your favourite older / previous gen platform to build budget stuffs on? Probably X99, or just older HEDT stuff in general, really. There's something quite satisfying about owning something you could never afford back when it was new. What was your favourite budget build or budget part that you've tested? I've always liked the Vega 64. I know it hasn't always been budget, but these days it's really quite a lot of bang for your buck. CPU-wise, I think I was always kind of attracted. Again, this is the HEDT stuff, so I kind of like the idea of the overclockable Xeons, like the 1680 V2 for X79. Even though that's, I mean, if X99 is becoming unviable, then X79 is already unviable, really, for a lot of modern uses. But on the other hand, the 1680 V2 is quite a rare CPU to find. You didn't really see it outside of Mac Pros. Also, I like the 1660 V3, which is, I think, the best value overclockable chip for X99. What were the specs of your very first build? So bear in mind, I've been using PCs since 1993, and custom builds weren't really a thing back then, or certainly not mainstream. Typically, for most of the 90s, you'd get a pre-built system. So my first one was an Amstrad Mega PC, which I've talked about in previous Q&As. It was a 25 MHz 386 with, I think, 2 megabytes of RAM. That was also the first computer I ever upgraded. I'd have been like 11 years old, and I upgraded the RAM from 2 to 3 megabytes. I didn't even go all the way up to 4 megabytes, so it wasn't really much of an upgrade. Also, I put a Sound Blaster card in there. I was really obsessed with getting a Sound Blaster because it came with a built-in like ESS audio drive chip or something like that wasn't compatible with everything I wanted to play. So I got myself a Sound Blaster. Now, the highlight feature of the Mega PC was that it was a PC and a Sega Mega Drive. You flip the panel across one way and it was a PC, flip it the other way and it's a Sega Mega Drive or Genesis. The installation of the Sound Blaster actually completely disabled the Mega Drive, and I was too young and inexperienced to know how to diagnose it. So yeah, that computer eventually got sold faulty because the Mega Drive didn't work. God, I wish I still had that PC. The second PC was an AST Advantage, which was, I think, a Pentium 100 with 16 megabytes of RAM and I think a 500 gig hard drive. It was 500 gig, what am I talking about? 500 megabyte hard drive and a CD-ROM. The CD-ROM was the big deal. This was the era of the PS1, and CD-ROM gaming was changing everything. You could fit more on a CD than you could on some hard drives. My first custom build was probably 2004 when I got my first job. I can't remember the specs. I think it might have been Socket 939, or it might have been AM2. It was an Athlon of some kind. Can't remember the graphics card. God, I'm old. What game do you think is the best optimized PC game ever released? I've not really given this enough thought, but off the top of my head, and it kind of pains me to say it, but it's probably GTA 5. I'd love to see a video about VR. Yes, next year is, I think, an anniversary year. I think it might be the year the first consumer version of the Oculus Rift came out. So I've been planning on doing some sort of anniversary content, like I do the 10 years later videos with high-end PCs. I might do something to celebrate the Oculus CV1. I've barely used any VR stuff myself. I went to an escape room once that was all VR, that was all Oculus Rifts. But no, I've never owned a VR headset of my own. So this could be an interesting experiment. This may sound dumb, but when, how, and why did you stop featuring Call of Duty games? There's a couple of reasons why. One was the constant updates. I started the channel doing, obviously, Fortnite and Warzone and Apex Legends, and these were games that would frequently have multi-tens of gigabyte downloads like every week. And the UK doesn't have great internet speeds in general, but in specific, my flat where I live can't get fast internet. The maximum speed our phone line supports is 63 megabits. So that was a big motivator for me to really sort of stop doing live service games and multiplayer content in general. So now I've cut it down to just Counter-Strike 2 for my CPU and mini PC reviews, and that's it. I still have to do regular updates, obviously. Games still have patches all the time, even sometimes years after release. So I still expect to have to do, like, potentially a download day every week where I leave my computer downloading games and just sit writing scripts while I wait. But that was the main reason, I think. The other reason was time, well, more time, but actual time benchmarking. I can benchmark Baldur's Gate 3 in like 10 minutes. I can benchmark The Last of Us Part 2 in 15 minutes. If I want to do a decent benchmark in a multiplayer title, I need to set aside 45 minutes to an hour to actually get decent benchmark results. And yeah, it just takes up too much time. Will you ever review the 3070 or 3070 Ti again? Probably yes. I've just picked up a 3060 Ti, which that video is probably coming next month. I owned the 3060 Ti when they were new, and I upgraded to the 3070, and I always felt like it wasn't really a worthwhile upgrade. I kind of still feel like that. I still feel like the 3060 Ti is the smart buy, and the 3070 shouldn't be more expensive. But yeah, maybe it'll be worth sort of confirming my bias. What is your favourite iceberg? I make no distinctions. All icebergs are kings and queens in my eyes. I never saw you using Linux. That's because I don't really use Linux. I've made a couple of Linux videos. I think I made a Chimera OS video, and I did a mini PC video. So if you don't watch my mini PC stuff, that'll be why you didn't see that one. I wanted to make a Linux video, a kind of they're very popular these days. You see full sort of AMD builds with Bazzite OS installed and have them as sort of console killers. I wanted to do one, and a sponsor had reached out, and I pitched the idea to them, and they liked it, and we were going to do it. And they haven't emailed me back in quite a long time. So that video is hopefully still going to come, but it may be the case that it's after everyone stopped talking about Linux again. Given the rise of UE5 and the lovely CPU use it comes with, at what point is it worth spending budget on an X3D and lowering the GPU budget? Depends on your target frame rate, really. I think 60 FPS, even in UE5 games, I think you can get away with a modern Ryzen 5 or i5 in pretty much everything, so long as you're not really targeting higher than 60-70 FPS. If you want high frame rates and you're not that into frame generation, and honestly I can't blame you, then that's definitely the point to start considering X3D chips, I think. Cyrix CPUs. No thank you. Do you plan on covering laptops or monitors in the future? I've already done both. I've made a couple of videos about my own sort of personal laptops, and they've never done very well. Oh, and monitors, I've done 2 Pixio monitor videos, which also did appallingly. So yeah, probably not. Is YouTube your day job? Yes, it is. I used to be a retail employee. I was in retail from 2004 full-time, 2001 part-time, and I did that up until I got made redundant in 2012, and then I did another retail job, and I quit that because it was like working for a cult. I had a part-time retail job as a sales rep, which I did alongside a freelance job as a photographer. Then I had a full-time retail job, which I did up until 2022, when I got made redundant again. And since then, I've been full-time on YouTube. Will I be doing productivity benchmarks on RDNA cards? I don't really have enough productivity software and enough kind of good quality productivity benchmarks that I can do, that I would be able to confidently do. So I'd probably need to invest a lot more money and time into building up my productivity suite, and there would then need to be some kind of incentive to do that. So probably not. Could I make new GOAT project videos about old GPUs? Yeah, probably. The format of the GOAT project was always designed to be expandable, so it was reviewing old graphics cards in games of their era and after their era to see how well they lasted over time. So yeah, there's absolutely no reason I couldn't do that with previous generation ones. The problem I had with putting them all into the same project was I started with the 4K era, so it was like the original, the 780 Ti, the 290X, which were the era after 4K was standardized. So I could kind of say, right, 1080p, 1440p, and 4K would have been resolutions that existed at that time. Once you go a generation before that, the language of resolutions changes. You've got 1680 by 1050 was a common resolution. 768p was a common resolution. The problem with doing GOAT project with significantly older platforms is you're not talking the same language as you are modern GPUs. That being said, I do have a bunch of older GPUs lying around at the moment. I've picked up a HD 7970 recently. I've got a GTX 475 for some reason. So yeah, it's entirely possible I could end up expanding the GOAT project. What hardware do you keep? Like I say, I've kept the 3080 Ti. I've kept quite a lot of the mini PCs. I've kept the RTX 4070. That's now my editing rig graphics card of choice. I've kept the 7900 XT, which is my CPU testing graphics card of choice. As I say, I've kept a bunch of the GOAT project cards. I've still got the Fury X, which is going to get its own video soon. And of course I've kept hold of my 1080 Ti, partly because it's got a custom cooler on and I think that devalues it. So I kind of always intended to pick up an original cooler from somewhere and then sell it. But for some reason I've never got around to doing that, so I've still got my 1080 Ti. Could I re-benchmark old CPUs? Yes, and I have an FX 9590 and a motherboard. I started testing it a few weeks ago with the intention of doing a video, and the memory was faulty. The DDR3 I had some DDR3 2133 that was fine last time I tested it, and now it just isn't. So I've ordered some more from AliExpress. It's on its way to me, and hopefully that will be coming soon. What's your favourite PC you've ever built? So in I think it was 2015 or 2016, I got back into PC building after being on hiatus for a few years. I decided I needed a distraction from work. I still need a computer. I can't really justify having a console and a computer. So I had a half decent PC at the time. It was a Ivy Bridge i5 3570K. With 16 gigs of RAM at a GTX 260, and this had been my work PC for the last few years. And I'd been watching Scrapyard Wars, and I'd been watching the Potato Masher series by Germ Gaming, and I thought, you know what? If I just upgrade my graphics card, this could be a gaming PC. So I sold the GTX 260 and bought a 670, which did very well. It was a very good car, but I very quickly sort of got into the enthusiasm of it all. So within a few months, I think I'd sold the 670 again and got a 290X. I sold the i5 and the motherboard and bought an X79 board with a i7 3930K. That's probably the most significant computer for me recently, because it was the first PC I made of like 90% used components, and it's the basis of a lot of what I've done since. My tech benchmarking YouTuber inspirations. Well, I've already mentioned LTT's Scrapyard Wars. That was a big inspiration for me getting back into secondhand computers. I think I credit Random Gaming in HD and Budget Builds Official as being channels who aren't particularly direct inspirations, but I would say they made me believe that I could be a YouTuber. Stylistically, I think my biggest influences are people like people from outside of tech, so quite a fan of Ahoy and White Light and Racervic and people like that. If I had to choose a state of permanent suffering, would I rather be always too hot or always too cold? No, I wouldn't. You should try out high-end first-gen i7 stuff. I have just picked up an X5650, I think. That's on my list of things to do. I'd want to see a tribute to the 70 cards. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I did a 1060 versus 4060 video last year, or earlier this year, and I like that, and I did want to do the same thing for the 70s, but I never got around to buying a 1070, so that kind of didn't happen. But yeah, it might be an interesting project idea. I'll give it some thought. What's the best or worst part of making PC-related content? It's all best parts, really. It's hard to think of worst parts, except it's never good when a video fails, you know? It's always a bit of a kick in the teeth when a video doesn't do well after you put tons of work into it. But on the other hand, that's true of any content creation. That's not unique to tech, I don't think. So yeah, it's all upsides, really. Have you thought about building the average gaming PC on the Steam hardware survey? Yes, I've already done that. That was a video called Buy Nothing, and it was what would gaming be like if you just had the average PC in 2025 and didn't upgrade anything. So yeah, that video already exists. I will probably do another one next year. What ship was your favourite to sink? Raylo. What's your story? So, I'm English. I'm 43, currently single, and not particularly looking. Worked in retail most of my life. Always had sort of pretentious creative ambitions that I've never really capitalised on properly. YouTube really has been kind of my first creative outlet that's actually earned me any kind of money. What's your opinion on shrimp? I'm not a fan. Have you ever Hackintoshed a computer? No. It was something I always intended to do. Before my YouTube days, I always wanted to. The more I looked into it, the more pointlessly complex it seemed to be, so yeah, I never got around to it. I'm not even sure it's still viable, since the Apple Silicon stuff. What's your opinion on custom physical PC games? I've seen a few. I've watched a few people's videos on that subject. I like the idea. What are your top 5 favourite looking graphics cards? I can't answer that because it's a future video idea. Tommy Web Pro asked a question I can't answer. Does the Intel Xeon E5 2630 V3 support 2011 V3 socket or older 2011? That is a V3. If it's a Xeon E5 with no V number after it, it is Sandy Bridge. If it's a V2, then it's Ivy Bridge. They are the LGA 2011 socket CPU platforms. The V3 and V4 are for 2011 V3, and V5 and 6 are for socket 2066, if I remember rightly. So, right, there's two questions there, or two ideas really. I did a kind of a low-end 4K video years ago, so I think I kind of always intended to go back and do other similar ideas. Maybe it's time to go back to those. Yeah, maybe a low-end 1440p or low-end ultra-wide or low-end VR. So yeah, maybe that's an idea. It won't be 2025, maybe 2026. Alternative OSs like Bazzite and SteamOS. I think, given the current feeling towards Windows, specifically Windows 11, I think it's wise to do more content about Linux. So yeah, that's certainly on the cards. Will AM4 ever die? Yes. And the second question. Right, so it's the videos I make where I put older hardware together or weaker hardware together and play older games. Yeah, I love doing those. I'm constantly thinking of doing more content like that. In fact, there might be one next week. What would you choose? Infinite bacon but no video games, or games, infinite video games but no games? What? Is there a game you can only play on KBM or controller? I play most games for work. Most of the benchmarking I do is on controller because it creates a sort of a smoother sensation when you're watching the video. When I'm actually playing for myself, most of the time I'm on controller unless I go into first person. First person stuff I almost always play with mouse and keyboard. Though, actually, I suppose, like GTA 5, I will drive with the controller, and then I'll drop the controller when I get out of the car, because I just find shooting with controllers is just a pain in the ass. What's the last bit of tech that made you say, oh wow? So it's not directly related to PCs, but I bought myself a motorized slider. I think it's called a Top Rig S60, something like that, and it's brilliant. I love it. It's not perfect, it's not the best slider you could ask for, but if you don't know what a slider is, it's a rail with a camera mount, and you just slide the camera along it and it gives you smooth panning movements. In the past, I've done it all handheld with something called a gimbal, which is a handheld camera stabilizer. 99% of the time, my gimbal footage needs digitally stabilizing afterwards. The slider never needs any kind of stabilization after the fact, which is less work, it's less image degradation, and it just looks better. It's not as easy to use as a gimbal. You've got to set it up, it needs to go on a tripod, but it is so smooth, it just glides along almost completely silently. It's easy to use, I love it. I know that's probably not what you're asking, but yeah, sorry, I had to be honest. Will you re-review the RX 6700 XT in 2025? Yes, but not 2025. I do want to do a 6700 XT review next year. And thank you for the comment about the thumbnails. Right, so when I reviewed the RTX 5060, I compared it against did I compare it against a 2080 Ti? I need to check, one sec. So yeah, my RTX 5060 review was literally called Can the RTX 5060 beat an RTX 2080 Ti? So I've already made that content. That will be the lens through which I look at future graphics cards. I think it's a useful one. The reviews I do for new graphics cards, the samples all come from Asus. They're all loan models. So when they come through, I don't have long to test them. And I don't have a big collection of modern GPUs to compare them to, like, say, Hardware Unboxed or Gamers Nexus do. So I kind of have to come up with my own spin, and comparing them against roughly equally capable older graphics cards seems like the reasonable thing to do. It seems like, people are looking to upgrade from older cards. Is it worth doing? That seems like a good question that I should be answering. And so far it's been successful. I did the 5060, the 5060 Ti, the 5070, and the 9060 XT 16GB in those same formats. So yeah, I'm going to keep doing that. Favourite game to benchmark? I think you might have the wrong idea about benchmarking. Benchmarking a game is finding a section of gameplay that is repeatable, something you can either manually save or that is near an automatic checkpoint, that is fairly representative of average gameplay, if possible slightly demanding, running through that for a few minutes, and then redoing that several times at different quality settings and different resolutions until you get a good depth of information. It's not quite the same as playing games. The exception, of course, being multiplayer games, because I don't think you can reliably get benchmarks of multiplayer games without actually playing them. So CS2 is pretty much the only multiplayer game I benchmark right now, and that is always fun. Thoughts on the 5080 and broad trends of the 80 series broadly? Well, broadly speaking, the 80 series have always been in a bit of a weird position, haven't they? If you think back to the 3080, that was a big deal because compared to the 980, the 1080 and the 2080, I think it had more of a reason to buy it over the lower model. So if you look at the 980, the 970 was far and away the more popular card for good reason. Technically, yes, it was a 3.5GB card, not a 4GB card, but for most people the 970 was the better purchase. The same with the 1070. The 1070 was a great card, the 1080 Ti was a great card, the regular 1080 just fell between two stools. I've not really looked at the 2080 recently, but my feeling is it's the same. There's not a lot of reason to go for a 2080 over a 2070 or 2070 Super. The 3080 was definitely a big step up from the 3070. I think the 3070 was kind of in the same position as the 2080 in that the 3060 Ti was good enough that you didn't need the 3070, and the 3080 was a big enough jump that by saving money on the 3070 you were kind of costing yourself a lot of performance. So in that context, I guess the 5080 is more like the old school approach where the 80 is not really significantly better than the model below it, and the model above it is a big jump. Have we moved on from the idea that budget GPUs are bad value and can't perform good enough? Unfortunately, no, I don't think we have moved on from that. I think there's still a sort of prevailing notion that older GPUs are not worth having, and a lot of the time it's true. But that's a manufactured thing. You know, we're in this situation now where everyone wants you to upgrade, everyone needs you to upgrade, and they've created very compelling reasons for you to upgrade, which would be great if we could afford it and if we had something to do with the old tech once it's become obsolete. How did you get your passion for PCs? Well, it all started off with a game called LucasArts X-Wing. I was reading a magazine when I was about 10 years old, and I was into Star Wars at the time, and I saw this magazine had screenshots from X-Wing, and it was the best thing I'd ever seen. And then I saw a TV program about it. Bear in mind this was before the internet, and yeah, I found out what it was. It was a game for PC. What's a PC? PC is a thing that costs at least £1,000 at a time where consoles were like less than 200 quid. What do you think the future is for Intel? Well, I don't think they're going away. I think they're still going to be a big player in PCs. But I think that the problems with Intel and the problems with Microsoft have the potential to create a sort of a schism. I think it could be the case that PC use does move over to other platforms, and there are people who are willing to fill the niche. You know, we've got alternatives to x86 are growing all the time. Alternatives to Windows are getting better all the time. It's not like it was in the 2000s or the 2010s. Intel are going to become less significant. They might not go away, for a while anyway, but if they did, maybe it wouldn't matter so much. Where do you get the music for your videos? So the channel theme is from the YouTube audio library, which is it's free to use for any creators on YouTube. It's called 808 Doorbell Chime, and it's by Unicorn Heads. I picked it because the channel was called Iceberg, and I thought it sounded kind of nautical. I don't know why, just something about it made me think of the sea. The rest of the music on the channel is from Backing Track, which is a side project of the YouTube channel EposVox. I don't like relying on other people for this content. I kind of wish I could make my own music, but it's just not a skill I have. There are lots of options out there for creators who want music in their videos. Most of them are paid, and I can't really justify spending the money on the music, so I really appreciate the people out there who make great quality stuff available for free. I suppose AI generated music could be an alternative, but I'm really not comfortable with that. What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? 42. Have you considered testing the RX 580? Interesting. RX 580, you say? I've not heard of this. Is this new? But for reals, please review the i5 10th gen. Alright. I was wondering if you could make a video about something like a lowest tier all compatible PC, AVX2, TPM2, DX12 Ultimate, Win 11. Sounds like a good idea. Do some more X79/X99. Sure. Alright. Favourite position? Well, I'm quite old and I get acid reflux, so I prefer to sleep on my right, but sometimes that doesn't really work for me, so I'm kind of forced to sleep on my left. Why do I use certain games? Well, I started off the channel focusing on this whole message of today's games, yesterday's hardware, so I would be constantly updating the library. New games would come out, there'd be new stuff on Game Pass, so I wanted to be as up to date as I could be. But a few people pointed out that this meant quite a lot of games were very similar, and on a technical level quite a lot of the games I reviewed used the same engine, so the actual information was perhaps not as useful as it could have been. So I've been quite conscious of that in recent years, and I do try to stick to a variety of engines. There's been quite a lot of backlash about UE5, so yeah, I try to make a point of saying, okay, this is the engine that this game uses, this one is a proprietary engine, this one is id Tech, so on and so forth. Also, there's a certain amount of personal choice. I look at games that interest and excite me and that I think maybe other people would be interested in. I'm not always right. I've definitely backed the wrong course a few times, but yeah, I'm going to keep doing that. Can I please test games a lot of people play? Popularity is not always top of my priority list. Like, I'm a middle-aged man. I would be worried hearing me talking about Minecraft if I were watching a video. Whereabouts in the UK are you based, mate? I am from Birmingham. Will you start benchmarking indie games? Maybe. I usually do, every now and again, I'll do a mini PC video with indie games on them, because they seem like a great platform for that. If I do spin off the new channel on mini PCs, there will probably be a regular sort of catalogue of indie games that get featured in those. But yeah, they seem like a good use case for lots of older tech, and like I said earlier, I've got some older CPUs and older GPUs that aren't going to work with a lot of the latest games, so they will definitely be looking at indie games as well. What's your opinion on dual GPUs? I'm sad that the technology isn't really an option anymore. I'm kind of disappointed that it's being sort of mandated away by developers of the technology and of the games, but I'm kind of glad we're not in a situation where the answer to our current performance problems are just buy more graphics cards. I can just see Todd Howard or someone like that just looking down their nose at you. Oh, I'm sorry, your current computer can't handle our latest tech extravaganza. Why don't you just get another 5090? Do you add cheese? That is not a very English question. I feel like that's an American thing. I don't remember the last time I was even offered cheese. What's your least favourite GPU and why is it the RTX 2060? My least favourite GPU is the Arc A380, and it's my least favourite because I haven't tried the Arc A310 yet. I'd love your opinion on CachyOS. Maybe you'll get it one day. Andy's Tech asks, build off. Yeah, let's do that. Drop me an email. Will you make videos about the Ryzen 7 1700? I did one this year. I did a group test of 8-core Ryzens, so I probably won't touch them again until there's more to say about them. What's your view on Threadrippers for gaming? Don't. You can get so many good components, such a good motherboard and CPU and cooler and RAM for the price of a single Threadripper motherboard. Yeah, it's not even worth thinking about. Do you think RDNA 3 will age badly? Yes, I think it's already started to age badly. I know people are finding ways of getting FSR 4 to quote-unquote work on RDNA 3 and older, but in general, I think just performance, and particularly RT performance, is going to... there's going to be a line of RDNA 4 and later, and then everything else. How did you get all the money? I get most of my money through AdSense, which is the money that Google pay you for views. So every 1,000 views I get about £2. Aside from that, I also get money from my patrons on Patreon and channel members. Sometimes I also get channel sponsors, so I've been sponsored by AliExpress a few times, and I've been sponsored by FlexiSpot a few times. I am open to accepting more sponsors, but I think I need to be a little more careful about who I accept, because it does feel like every few weeks a new sponsor is being unveiled as being secretly bad. Why do you take money from Nvidia? I don't. Why do you think I take money from Nvidia? Telling your religious and political views would be a great idea. Yes, it would. I am a pastafarian. Why do I say Soixante Neuf? Soixante Neuf is French for 69. I say Soixante Neuf partly because it just sounds a bit more classy than 69 nice, and partly as a homage to the classic 2000s movie Talladega Nights, The Ballad of Ricky Bobby, which is not only one of my favourite movies, it's also one of Christopher Nolan's favourite movies, I shit you not. Are you an unk or a dude? I don't know. When are you going to show your face? Almost all other tech YouTuber has shown their face. Why so secretive? You want people to pay you money but don't dare to show your face? Even Nexus Tech has shown his face in most of his videos. That's a really shitty way of asking. Thank you. I don't want to be an internet celebrity. I enjoy some measure of privacy, and it's easier to record these things in just audio form than it is in video. Also, I don't have to pay attention to what I look like, how I dress, what my room looks like. I can just record and edit the audio and put it over some gameplay and some B-roll, and it looks fine. Anyway, I see there is some sort of benefit these days in being more authentic and more real as a creator, because obviously there is this AI uprising and people are scamming their viewers by creating everything entirely with chatbots and things. So I see why there would be some level of distrust. However, I'm still not going to whip out a camera and film myself. Here is a 10-year-old picture of me from my Steam profile picture, just to prove to you that I'm not actually a robot. Anyway, thank you all for watching, thank you for subscribing, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.